Know your own limitations. If you need help, then get some more help there. One of the nice things about having a volunteer agency is we have a lot of members, and a lot of people are willing to just come out and help just lift somebody up off the ground if that's what you need help. Make sure everybody knows what you're doing, not just your partner. If you've got 3 or 4 people doing a lift, make sure everybody is on the same page and is working together to get the job done. So general rules, get your feet underneath you. Your legs are the strongest part of you, so that's what you're going to use to lift as much as you can. So occasionally you're going to have to do some kind of curly motions to lift people up. But as much as you can, you want your arms more or less locked out, and you're going to be lifting with your legs. As you're lifting, don't turn or twist. That's a really good way for a back injury. Don't try and compensate, lean over when lifting with one hand. And there's only so much you can not compensate and not fall over. So you're going to have to compensate a little bit, but this is especially when you're carrying like one side of a gurney or something on a slope. You don't want to lean too much this way. Try and stay above your feet. You keep your weight as close to your body as possible, so you're not lifting way out here, you're lifting in here. If you've got a device that can make the transition easier for you, like a stair chair, I'll show you what that is, then use the devices. Okay, so for patients that can sit up and can in general control themselves, then we'll put them in a stair chair going downstairs instead of like carrying them down on a backboard or carrying them down on a stretcher or something like that. The book calls this the power lift and the power grip. Basically, like I said, it's getting the weight in close, using your legs to lift. As much as you can, your arms are going to just be out, so you're not lifting with your arms, you're lifting with your legs. To get the gurney up high into the ambulance, you are going to have to do what you call a curl motion. Reaching, so we have patients in weird positions. You're going to end up reaching. It happens. Try and keep your back kind of locked in, so curled back a little bit, not like way bent over. Avoid twisting, always avoid twisting while you're reaching or lifting, moving. Try and avoid reaching more than 15 to 20 inches in front of you. When we do like transfer the patients from our gurney to the hospital bed, sometimes you got to reach a little further than that. But most of the time with that we can just slide, so it's not too big a deal. If you end up thinking you're going to need to reach for a while doing some kind of strenuous thing, that's usually not going to end well, so we're trying to come up with a better plan. In general, pushing is better than pulling. Again, trying to get your back locked in. The line of pull should be through the center of your body and through the center of the patient's body, if at all possible. We want to keep the spine in line as much as possible. And again, weight close to the body. If you've got to lift something that's low, we're going to squat down to get it. We're not going to bend over to get it. Try and avoid pushing and pulling things up high overhead. Keep your arms in. Okay. So, depending on scene safety issues, depends on kind of how fast we move patients and how much protection of the C-spine and back we give. So your emergency move, this is something where something's going wrong, like right now, and you need to get the patient out of there. So hazardous scene, think Fire, think somebody's in a car that's in a ditch and it's filling with water and going into the water or something. Somebody that's hanging upside down, can't breathe kind of thing. That would be a good emergency move. If somebody is unresponsive and not breathing, and like laying on prone, laying face down, then we're going to roll them over fairly quickly because we got to take care of that. If you have a patient that is in the way of other patients that are dying, essentially, then you're allowed to emergency move the patients that are not dying, but maybe in other situations you would take more time moving them. You can move those patients faster to get to the dying patients. That's acceptable. So some examples of emergency moves: clothes drag. So you just grab them whatever clothes they're wearing, slide them along the floor. A head first drag. So if you're going down the stairs, you're grabbing both of the patient's arm and kind of taking them down backwards. Obviously, head first is a lot better than the feet first method here. The firefighter's drag. So if you're in a flame over environment, you got lots of heat up high and you want to be down low. That's a decent way to haul somebody out. If you got a patient that's small enough, you can just pick them up and carry them. So mostly we do this with kids, occasionally with little old ladies. If they're able to assist at all, you can kind of do a just assisted arm over the shoulder kind of thing. Do it with 2 people. Notice on these, like when you're dragging somebody, we're always trying to drag them in line with their spine. Okay. So you're not grabbing their arms and pulling them sideways and jerking them around like that. That's somehow in line with their spine. Okay, and the next kind of tier down is these urgent moves. So with urgent moves, we start using our C-spine devices. Okay. So with the emergency moves, basically we're just grabbing them with whatever they're wearing or whatever we happen to have on us, just pull them, get them out of the way of danger or get them out of the way of somebody else. For urgent moves, we're going to start pulling out our backboards, pulling out the KED, that kind of thing. So we're still moving fairly rapidly here, but we're going to be applying devices. So like onto a long spine board, we're going to log roll the patient, put the board next to him, weigh him down on the board, put him on the stretcher. We'll practice getting people out of vehicles. But the basic procedure is if you have somebody sitting in a vehicle, you come in and slide a backboard up under one butt cheek and then kind of rotate them around, either feet first or head first, depending on the vehicle, and slide them out. We'll start practicing this stuff again tonight. Okay, and finally your non-urgent move. This is where your patient is just fine otherwise, but they may be having some neck pain or something where you're suspecting that there might be a spinal fracture. So no immediate life threat. These non-urgent moves are often the same procedure we're going to do for an urgent move, just a little bit slower, a little more practiced, I guess. It's probably not super clear as to the differences between these things until we start getting out there and doing it. But just remember, the emergency move stuff is without devices. Urgent moves, we're using backboards, other things. Okay, so let's talk about some devices. Most every call you go on, whenever we have a patient, they're going to be transported on the gurney or stretcher or wheels or cot, whatever other things people call that thing, but stretcher. So ours look like this. They're powered. Powered by a little battery. It sits up in here. It's got a little hydraulic pump. Makes the thing go up and down. They're nice in that you can put that thing at any height you want, so it just, any height at all. The older models that aren't powered, they had basically 3 different levels you could put them at, and if that level didn't work for you, well, too bad. But these are nice that way. The downside of the powered things is they're heavier, so that gurney by itself weighs almost 100 pounds. So then you factor in your patient weight too, and that's what you got to lift into the back of the ambulance. They do make auto-loading gurneys too. We don't have one of those. I think Potlatch does though, maybe Deary, I don't remember. So there are some gurneys you just basically wheel it up to the back of the ambulance and get it locked in and hit the right button and it pulls it in right for you. That's kind of cool. But for ours, you got to hook it on the tail end of the ambulance and then hold up this end while the wheels go up and then slide the whole thing in. This is when you got to, especially with our ambulances, they're a little higher than that. You got to give a pretty good curl to get it up in there. They make these things in bariatric versions too. Most of these things are going to use some kind of ramps to load because you're not going to stand there and try and hold one end of that thing up. We don't have bariatric specific gurneys, but our gurneys are rated to like 700 pounds. They've got, oops, going the wrong way. That's not the right picture. Our newer gurneys at least have, instead of rails that go this way and that way, they kind of fold up like wings, and so they can accommodate larger patients too on our gurneys. Stair chair, I mentioned that a little bit earlier. So this is just a device for taking patients downstairs. It doesn't go up the stairs, it just goes down the stairs. So this is a device, we're not really worried about spinal injuries, so this isn't something you're going to use if you get called for like a fall and neck pain or something like that. But this thing's got a rating of like 500 pounds, I want to say. So it'll accommodate, basically if the patient will fit on that thing, then it'll accommodate them down the stairs. And it makes it really easy to get people downstairs. It takes almost, I shouldn't say no effort, but it's pretty easy. Short spine boards. We carry these things mostly because the state regs say we got to carry one. I think maybe we pulled one of these things out like twice or something in the time I've been here, so they're not used real frequently at all. Sometimes they're nice to protect your patient during an extrication thing. If you can sometimes stick that board in between the patient and whoever's using cutting tools and stuff. You can get that in there easier than a full spine board. The vest type extrication device, also known as a KED. So if somebody says go get the KED, that's what they mean. KED is like Kleenex. This is the first company that made these things. It's a Kendrick extrication device. So these things have basically replaced what you would use a short spine board for. And mostly what we use these for is to get somebody out of a car seat that has neck, back pain, and maybe some actual deficits where they're tingling in fingers or can't feel their legs or something like that, where you really think there might be a spinal injury. And we'll stick one of these things in behind them, get them all strapped to this before we start doing anything, and this helps keep them in an inline position. Scoop. So yeah, a picture of our current one. This is what our scoops used to look like. So basically the idea with this is just what it sounds like. It comes into two pieces, so these disconnects here and it disconnects there. And the middle of this thing is really thin, so like 1/4 inch. So you break it apart and then slide it together underneath somebody and you scoop them up. We used to teach that these things were not good for people with spinal injuries, but now they are considered appropriate for that use. They actually move people a little bit less than the whole hog rolling somebody on their side and stuff. So as long as you can get people's heads secured and stuff on these, then they're all right. Stoke stretcher, or basket stretcher. Some people call it a litter. So this is primarily a rescue device. So the only place you'll find these things is on our rescue rigs. But if you gotta haul somebody up an embankment, like somebody wrecks their car over the edge a ways, then this is what you're gonna put them in and haul them up. So these things are strength rated, so you can tie rope systems into like these little points there. And you can use them for like high angle rope rescue, medium angle rope rescue, or just carrying somebody up a hill. They work pretty good for that. We always put your patient in, on like a backboard or something else before you stick them in the stokes. I shouldn't say always. 99% of the time, they're going to be on a backboard or something. In addition to that. Flexible stretchers. We don't carry these. You might find them somewhere. So this is kind of similar to that vest type device where it can roll up, but it won't bend longwise, if that makes sense. So there's like wood slats running through that thing. So it'll roll up but not bend if you're doing longwise. Vacuum mattress. We do carry these guys. These are really nice devices for protecting the spine when you think the patient's going to be on that thing for a while, like if they actually have a spinal injury. So if you actually get somebody with like a C2 or 3 or 4 spine fracture, they're going to be on whatever device you put them on until they get that thing secured like surgically. So it could be a long time. Lying on a hard, straight plastic backboard is not comfortable at all. You can tolerate it for 15-20 minutes or so if you're young enough, and then even after that, they're painful. So these things are basically like a beanbag, but you suck all the air out of it and it becomes rigid, so it molds right to the patient's contours, right to their back. It's just like lying on a beanbag chair the whole time, which is pretty nice. That works out really well. The disadvantages of these things are they're not rigid until you suck the air out of them. So you can't do like that nice little maneuver of pulling somebody out of a car and slide them out onto it kind of thing. So it doesn't work for that. You've got to have a nice flat area to put that thing on, which we don't always have, especially like working over the edge, car accident scenes, that kind of thing. Backboards work pretty well there because you can just stick one end of the dirt and have somebody hold the other end. It doesn't matter what the angle is. You can get your backboard flat. You can't do that trick with these things. So they have their limitations, but if you're picking up somebody that's going to be on that board for a while or on that device for a while, if you can make this work, this is your best choice. So a lot of things go into how you pick the patient carrying device. So the things that are good for spine protection are this thing, that thing, that one, this one now, that one, not that one. Not generally the stretcher. So if somebody's complaining of neck pain, but otherwise is not showing any signs, symptoms of a neck injury, so like the neck hurts, but they can wiggle all their toes, wiggle all their fingers, there's no numbness or tingling, no nothing like that, and they don't have like heinous distracting injuries like a big old broken femur or something, and we're allowed to just put them in a C-collar and stick them on the gurney, and we can call that spinal protection. But that's about it. In general, the use of backboards. I don't have a picture of a backboard in here, do I? There it is. The rigid backboard, we're using these less and less because we found that it causes pain and not necessarily injure people, but it's not as neutral as we thought before. So the thinking used to be, well, just throw on a backboard, you know, it's not going to hurt them to be on the backboard, and they might have a neck injury, so why not, right? But 99% of the time, they really do not need to be on that backboard, and they're painful. So we don't use the backboards as much. We're also getting more into letting patients self-extricate from car accidents, again, if they're more or less okay, as far as you can tell, then they can step out on their own and they'll protect their own spine. That's the thinking. You can put them on the gurney that way instead of us maintaining the whole maneuver and very carefully directing their motion ourselves. Okay, so the general how to do somebody with a suspected spinal injury. So what we're worried about, remember some anatomy here, you've got your C-spine vertebrae, 7 of them, right? And right about like 3, 4, 5 through those vertebrae, that's where the nerves that control your breathing and stuff run out of the spinal cord. So if you get cervical spine fractures from like 3, 4, 5 or up and you start damaging those nerves, patients stop breathing. It's a bad thing. So that's why we're trying to protect neck and spine especially. You get injuries other places, then you start getting paralysis, you know, temporary or permanent of other things, limbs, arms, that kind of thing. So we're gonna, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
How often do you see patients that have suspected spinal injuries but not other like major injuries or trauma?
Pretty frequently. Yeah, so people get like, especially like rear end accidents where they get a little bit of whiplash and they'll have neck pain from getting knocked around, but otherwise be fine. Sometimes they get a little, you know, knocked around and get out of the car and start walking around and doing stuff and then decide, oh, shit, I got neck pain. And so, you know, they're up walking around and talking to people and now we're worried about spinal injuries a little bit. So yeah, it's pretty frequently actually. So we'll go through a little bit more when we practice with the devices, but the basic idea is you're going to come up and grab that person's head and keep them from wiggling their head around very early on. So this is basically, hi, how you doing? My partner's going to grab your head, kind of thing. And then we'll get them in a C-collar pretty quickly and then get them to whatever device. We're going to immobilize torso first and then head. We'll get through all that. Again, without a suspected spinal injury, you can pretty much do whatever makes sense to do. So just grabbing somebody's, under the shoulders or under the armpits and grabbing their legs and lifting them up onto the gurney is a perfectly acceptable way to get somebody up there. If they're light enough, you can kind of get on one side. I generally like doing this for patients that weigh much at all, just because you don't have somebody on the other side here. So unless you're not lifting them very far, they're going to be off balanced. So for really light patients, if you're dealing with a kid or something, fine. Sliding people over to the hospital bed, or from the hospital bed to your gurney. I'm just going to pull them on whatever sheets they're on. You try and get these things a little more even height than that. If you're down to 1.5 inches, 2 inches or so of height difference there, you're usually good, as long as the side you're coming from is a little higher. But whatever this is, 5 inches or so, that's a little bit of a drop. Try not to do that much. Recovery position, mentioned this. We were talking about positioning patients. But that's the position we put people in if we're worried about them throwing up. So anybody that's nauseated, unconscious, that kind of thing, we'll put them on their side. But this is without spinal injuries, yeah.
What do you do if you're worried about them throwing up but they also have a suspected spinal injury?
They say you put them on their back. If they start throwing up, then you grab the whole backboard and put it on its side, and then you can suction and get stuff out. But they're on the backboard. We don't transport them like on the backboard on their side just by default. We're going to leave them supine and then move them if they start throwing up. Position of comfort is just that, whatever makes the patient happiest. If it's sitting up, that's fine. If it's sitting up more vertical, that's fine. Laying back more. For shock, we're going to lay them down, put them in supine position. There's nothing particularly wrong with lowering the head or elevating the legs, but it doesn't provide any real patient benefit either. So. This is the getting them over to a hospital bed thing. You just have at least 2 people on either side. If your patient's larger, then use more people. But you're just going to grab the sheets and slide them over. The hospital beds are wider than that, so you end up reaching a little further. But